Hi, everyone. I'm here with Dr. Steve Purdom, founder of Enneagram Las Vegas. He's been studying and teaching the Enneagram for over 25 years, and today we're talking about a really powerful upcoming workshop he's leading called Sexuality through the Prism of your Enneagram Type. It's happening Saturday, August 23rd from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. in Las Vegas at 2 Turnberry Place. We're not going to unpack everything here, but we are going to talk about why this topic matters and how our Enneagram type might influence how we connect in those relationships. Steve, thank you for being here today. To start us off, what made you explore the topic through the lens of the Enneagram?
The Enneagram is a wonderful tool because it identifies our motivations behind the behaviors that we exhibit. And so once you understand someone's motivation, then I think all of us have a little bit more compassion for each other. For instance, why does a type 5 want to be so quiet and tend to be happy being alone? It's a way of protecting themselves. Well, once you understand that, then you can be more compassionate in your judgment of their behavior, or hopefully lack of judgment in their behavior, and accept where they are. Well, sexuality is a highly charged issue, and so the Enneagram is a great tool to look at it without the judgment that you might get otherwise.
Yeah. And before we go any further, I think it might help to clarify something. When we use the word sexuality in the context of this workshop, what are we really referring to?
Well, at the high level, we're talking about intimacy, but we also are talking about the physical aspects of sexuality also. And this workshop is going to be an open-ended discussion with the participants in the workshop. And so it's going to go wherever they lead it. If they want to talk about the emotional aspects of relationships with the overlay of sexuality, that's fine. If they want to talk about the specifics of sexuality, that's fine also. So wherever the group leads it, I'm just going to facilitate that discussion.
That's great. I know you've done a lot of research over the years. Are there any books or resources that have influenced your thinking on this topic?
Yes, I've actually looked quite a bit for information, but like I said, it's a highly charged emotional discussion, and I think people have stayed away from it a bit. And the other thing, too, is our sexual relationships are extremely complex. There's just all sorts of aspects to them. There's boundaries, there's our childhood wounding that comes in. Society has told us that we need to approach sexuality in this direction for one person and in another direction for a different person. And so it's an extremely complex subject. There is one book that I read, it was written in 2011. Monica Coates, who's a clinical psychologist, and Judith Searle, who is a well-known and well-respected Enneagram teacher. They wrote a book, and the title is Love, Sex, and Personality. And so they had some helpful suggestions in the book, looked at relationships through the lens of the Enneagram type, which is helpful. And Judith is very skilled at doing that. So that book was helpful, but I haven't seen much in the last 15 years since I read that one.
Well, and that totally makes sense. When it comes to personality frameworks, there's a lot out there. What do you think makes the Enneagram especially useful here?
Well, the thing I said before, it goes directly to motivation. So once I know somebody's Enneagram type, I know what motivates them. And so it just changes the relationship immediately. So if someone's being fearful, then, and I know their Enneagram type, I know what's driving the fear. And for 5, it's going to be awkward social situations will make them fearful. For type 6, it's going to be that they are fearful about their physical safety. And for type 7s, it's going to be fear about emotional pain. And so it's different for those 3 types, but all 3 of them, fear is the biggest motivator. So, if I'm dealing with one of those 3 types, my approach is totally different because their reactivity is based on their motivation, and their motivation is very specific for them.
Yeah. That's great. So let's talk about the workshop itself. Could you share some of the ways our Enneagram types might influence our view on how we experience sexuality?
I don't want to give away the whole workshop, but there are 9 personality types. Each one of them views the world through a different prism. And for instance, one of the ones that you and I've talked about, is type ones have a very strong superego or inner critic. And so the question for them will be, does that inner critic come into play in a relationship where you're very attracted to someone else? Does it intrude and say, well, we're not sure this is the right thing for us to do, and maybe you need to reevaluate your behavior? Is that important in a relationship? I'm pretty certain it is, and I've got several type ones coming to this workshop, and so I'm just going to ask them the question: how does your inner critic influence your view of sexuality? There are other things too. There are something called instinctual subtypes. Some of us are what we call self-preservation, which means food, clothing, shelter is really important to us. Some of us are called one-on-ones, which means that relationships are really important to us. And then some of us are social, which means large groups are important to us. And the self-pres people tend to look out for themselves and are the ones who could possibly live in a cabin in the wilderness. But the one-on-one people are the Romeo and Juliets of the world, and they have to have the other person there to satisfy their emotional needs. Well, the one-on-ones are going to be the ones who want intimacy the most. And then the social group wants the group more than they want intimacy with one other person. And so that influences our view of sexuality. Then it goes on and on. The Enneagram is actually it's a personality typing system, but it's actually fairly complicated in its understanding of human psychology.
Yeah. I know when we talked once recently about boundaries. You mentioned boundaries in sexual relationships too. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Boundaries we're always managing boundaries. I actually put together a chart, and it said, how important is this boundary on a scale of 1 to 5? And then I said, how important is the person you're trying to set boundaries with on a scale of 1 to 5? I was trying to simplify this. And it turns out that if the boundary is really important, which it might be in a sexual relationship, then that becomes a 5. And if the person you're interacting with is very important in that relationship, and surely they are, that's a 5. So all of a sudden, this is a charged boundary setting in a relationship. So need to identify where people want to set boundaries. They need to have a discussion with their partner about where those boundaries are. They need to come to some middle ground on boundaries between the two of them in a situation in which there's a lot of emotional energy there. And so that's complicated. Then we have all of these taboos that both society and our parents taught us. And so those all come in. And my wife is Japanese. She was raised in Japan. There are no public displays of affection in Japan. Parents don't even hug their children. And so there's a real gap in physical contact. Well, I come from Georgia, which is a Southern culture, and it's very warm, and it's very friendly, and it's very touchy-feely. So we come from two different dynamics, and so there's that part that complicates a relationship. And it just goes on and on and on. And what we're going to try to do is break down the complexities of a relationship and in the context of sexuality. That's going to be a complex discussion.
I remember once you mentioned when you were referring to bonding, you also referred to a song at one point, which I thought was really great.
Yeah, I cannot get this song out of my head. Looking for love in all the wrong places,
Yes.
looking for love in too many faces. And what I have decided, and I'm going to bring this up at the workshop, and there's a physician coming to the workshop that I know he has a personal friend, and he has said that he looked for love in all the wrong places and he looked for love in too many faces. And so I'm going to ask him a question about if you did not bond with your caretaker as a infant, young child, are you looking for that bonding in a relationship with the opposite sex? And I think we are. I think in the early childhood bonding that we lose boundaries between ourselves and our parent, whoever the caretaker is. And I think in a sexual relationship, we lose boundaries between ourselves and our partner. And so I think that the sexual relationship is perceived as substitute almost for the bonding that we didn't get as children.
Mm-hmm.
And so that question is going to come up.
Yeah.
We've already talked about levels of complexity. I'm thinking that my 2-hour workshop is not going to be long enough to cover all of these.
It might be a part one, right? I mean,
Might be
there's a
fun.
lot there. I think that song paints such a great picture. So beyond all the insights that people might have during the workshop, what do you hope that people will walk away with afterwards?
Yeah, the first thing I hope they'll walk away with is approaching the subject matter without judgment. If they don't judge themselves and they don't judge their partner, then that'll be hugely helpful to them. And so then, if they have an understanding of their prism that they're looking at this relationship with and their partner's prism, then that will make a huge difference in how they approach resolution of whatever conflict comes up. So if I understand that my partner is not touchy-feely, but I am, then I can look for middle ground, but not judge my partner. And as one of my psychologists who comes to our meeting said, not pathologize them. So this is not pathology. This is a cultural learning, and how can you judge that? What you need to do is understand it and then look for a resolution between the two cultures. And that's true of all of the aspects of relationships in general, but also especially important in the intimate relationship between two human beings.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. So who would you say this workshop is best suited for?
If you're going to attend this workshop, you need to be knowledgeable about the Enneagram. That said, this workshop is beneficial to everyone. And even if you're older, then it's beneficial to understanding that aspect of your life when it was played a bigger role. Semi-joke one time that the reason grandmama was reading the Bible is she was preparing for her final exams. Well, and in a way, for me personally, I want to resolve as much emotional dissonance that is inside of me, or emotional conflict, if you like that word better, and have as much understanding of who I am as a human being and how I got to that place in my life. How did this Enneagram type, that is my tool to interact with the world with, and then how did my experiences as both a child and a young adult and even later in life impact my behavior? And so I want to put all of that together. And one of the ways I've done that is by breaking it up into segments. We had a long workshop a couple of weeks ago in which we talked about shadow. This workshop is going to be about sexuality. We could do the same thing over money or over how we grieve. I mean, the Enneagram is so helpful in any of these behaviors that we're trying to understand. And what it goes to immediately is the motivation of the behavior. And also, the Enneagram is a dynamic tool. It's two people moving in relationship to each other, or 100 people moving in relationship to each other. And so it makes it a much more fluid and dynamic way of understanding relationships than some of the more fixed psychology tools that are available.
That's perfectly said. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? That was amazing.
Well, the thing I probably should add is we are fully booked for this workshop. There seems to be a lot of interest, and we don't have any extra room for this workshop, but I'm going to teach it again in the fall. And so if you're watching this video and you can't attend this one, but you want to attend another workshop on the same subject, I will teach it on the weekend of October 3rd and 4th. So I invite them to come then. And they're always welcome, and they'll be in a safe space, and there will not be judgment coming from me anyway.
That's fantastic. And that's 100% true. Well, thank you again, Steve. This is great, and it really put this topic into context. And I can too see how important this is going to be, which, I mean, they all have been. So again, for anyone interested in future events, you can visit EnneagramLasVegas.com to learn more, to also subscribe for email updates for upcoming workshops and events. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you, Deidre.